Yom Haledut Sameach, Yom Haledut Sameach.
And what's the difference between Judaism and Zionism?
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך.
Do Jews believe they are the only chosen people of God? Thank you so much, David, for giving us the time and a chance to ask you questions about your faith. So, the purpose of this discussion is to create awareness about your faith and also to get rid of wrong perceptions that people have about Judaism, especially in our part of the world. So, I'm going to start this discussion with the first question. What is the concept of God in Judaism, and how do Jews perceive and connect with God?
Okay, well, that's a tricky question in itself because you can write a book on that. Okay, in fact, we do have one. We call it the Bible. The nation of Judaism, which is approximately 4,000 years ago, began with one of the first Jews, so to speak, and his name was Abraham. He was one of the first to embrace a monotheistic religion. Okay, well, everybody around that time worshipped multiple gods. Okay, and Abraham was called out, and he was known as an Ivrit or a Hebrew, which means to be called out. So he began this faith, and from that point we've understood that we have one God. This one God, this monotheistic God, has through his people chosen to advertise himself, to use a selected group of people to act as sales representatives, you could say, to sell the product, and that product is a monotheistic God. That the world is created by one God and one God alone. One of the main prayers in Judaism that centralizes this monotheistic idea is what we call the Shema. You recite this prayer every day, which is quite simple in Hebrew. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Il Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. So this oneness is paramount to understanding and having a relationship.
That brings me to the next question, David. How do Jews pray? And what significance does the Wailing Wall and the Temple of Solomon hold in Jewish worship?
Most Orthodox Jews will pray 3 times a day, okay, sometimes 4. And the reason for that is that we have the founding fathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. And Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov instituted different types of prayers. So the 3 prayers are based on the foundation of the 3 forefathers who then instituted prayers at a certain time of each day. Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, morning, afternoon, and evening prayers.
Right.
Yes. Our prayers are based on what we will call Avodat Mikdash, or temple prayers, okay, or temple works. So what structure we saw in the temple times, which was either the first temple of Solomon or the second temple of Herod, that prayer structure is the basic structure of Jewish prayer to this day. And the other part of the question was?
The significance of the Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall, first of all, just to clear up a misnomer, the Wailing Wall is actually seen as a derogatory term, okay? So the Wailing Wall gives the impression that Jews are constantly crying, okay?
Yeah.
So, and this Wailing Wall context was given by Christian pilgrims several centuries ago.
Right.
The actual word for it is hakotel, okay, or the wall, okay. The kotel is the most holy place Jews can pray in at this time.
Right.
It's the western wall of the second temple, okay.
Right.
So after the Romans destroyed the second temple around 70 AD, the western wall remained. Everything else got pretty much destroyed. So this western wall became a symbolism of the previously destroyed temple, and therefore it became a sort of like a gathering place that, okay, the temple's gone, but the western wall remains. So let's make this our number one place until the prophesied third temple is built.
All right.
So now, obviously, we lost the first temple, and that was due to the sin culminating to the point where the bucket of sin is overflowing and there's judgment from our Heavenly Father. Then we lost the second temple for the same bucket overflowing, different reasons. Like the second temple, for example, was lost from what we call sinat chinam, or baseless hatred. So we've destroyed, through our own sins, we've destroyed 2 houses already. So why didn't the second house was built some 70 to 80 years after the first house was destroyed. So why is the third house now 1930 years and still nothing happened? And that's likened to a father that looks after a son that gives him a nice pair of clothes, and he goes out and runs in the mud and plays in the mud and gets them all dirty. So he says, no problem, I'll give you another set of clothes. So he goes out and runs in the mud and gets them all dirty a second time. And then he says, no problem, here's a t-shirt and some shorts, and I'll get you a third set of clothes, but I'm going to hang them up in the closet. And when you're mature enough and when you're worthy enough, then I will give you those third set of clothes. But until then, you're in shorts and t-shirt.
When do you think the time is going to come for that, for the third time, third time the temple is going to be built?
Well, it's prophesied that it will happen. If one opens the book of Ezekiel in chapters 40 to 48, and that discusses what we call Olam Haba, or the world to come, then it talks about the third temple and how the services will be restarted, etc. Now, this is where the controversy begins, because whilst it tells you the temple will be built, it doesn't tell you exactly when. So you've got proponents in the Jewish world that will say it will be built before Messiah, and you've got proponents that will say it will be built after Messiah.
Right.
Now, with mathematically the return of Messiah so imminent, I really can't see it happening before. Okay, the political situation doesn't allow it. You're probably aware that in 2001, when we had the 9/11 incident, there was the Palestinians stated that the encroachment into the Temple Mount, or what they call Al-Aqsa Mosque, was one of the reasons why the terrorism attack was done in the 9/11 Twin Towers. And then you may be aware again that 7th of October massacre came when the Palestinians came in and slaughtered 1,200 Jews back in 2023. One of the reasons they stated that was they call it the Al-Aqsa flood. And again, because they see the Jewish world encroaching into the Al-Aqsa Mosque area. So they're trying, the attempt there is to try and halt that progress. But nonetheless, we see creeping forward of this. Whether it happens before or after Messiah, I don't know. You can write books and books on this, and you can debate. This rabbi will say yes, and that rabbi will say no. Yeah.
But that's something that you guys believe it's going to happen.
Yeah, it'll happen. But that part's no problem. But just the when is the question. Yeah. At the moment, in our world, we've already pre-manufactured, prefabricated pretty much all the components of the third temple, and they're sitting off-site. And they're just waiting for the political situation. Okay, so at the moment the political situation won't allow it. I mean, like if you went back 100 years, no Jewish person ever thought we would have Jerusalem again. And then voila, 1967 it came back. And then no Jewish person will think, well, we'll never get the temple again. And here we are, everything's already built off site, just waiting for the political wind to change. Yeah.
So I'll come to the third question, David. Third question is, can someone convert to Judaism? They come from another faith. Does Judaism actively seek converts like Islam and Christianity?
Okay, conversion to Judaism is a complex matter. It is obviously free for anybody of any faith to convert to Judaism. But unlike Christianity or Islam, you don't have Jewish evangelists going out and preaching the religion to say, come and join us. It's an introspective, inclusive religion. It doesn't go out and preach. There is an element of Judaism that does go out and preach, but their job is to find other Jews and help them to become religious Jews, okay? Rescue them from secularism, if you know what I mean.
There's one more question that I really wanted to ask you, David. Do Jews believe they are the only chosen people of God? And if so, what does being chosen mean in context of Judaism?
Okay. Do we believe we're the chosen people? No.
You don't?
Because the chosen people are all his creation, okay? It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, whatever. You are all his creation. In fact, there's a very good verse in the book of John, chapter 3, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." So this tells you that his love for the world, that is, regardless of religion, is paramount. His creation is you and I, and it's not based on religion. It's based on humanity. You're a human in the form of Adam. I'm a human in the form of Adam, and we are his creation. We are chosen. Now, as for the biblical definition, the Bible itself calls out the Israelites, or what we commonly call today the Jewish people. And it specifically says, "For I chose you, not because of your being a great nation, but because you're a small nation. You are small and weak and humble, not great and mighty and powerful." So from that context, that where it says, "I chose you," this is where this, say, misrepresentation became, "Oh, they're the chosen people."
Just one more question. Which religion do you think is closest to Judaism in terms of beliefs or practices?
Okay, let's divide that up into beliefs and practices. So in practice, I would think Islam is closer to Judaism. In belief, I would think Christianity is closer to Judaism. Okay, why? Because Islam is set by rules, traditions, beliefs and understandings, and they follow that. Okay, but the Christians will take the Bible and they'll say, well, we don't need to do that because Jesus changed it all, or Jesus nailed it to the cross, or Paul changed it, or whatever. The reasoning changes from church to church. So Islam follows us, forgive me for my lack of understanding, perhaps a strict definition of Quran and the Hadith, and that's similar to the Jewish world following a strict definition of Torah and the Talmud, where the Christian side will say, no, we don't need to. But as for belief, well, obviously the belief in the Christian world that Yeshua, Yeshua of Nazareth, came as the begotten Son of God Almighty, that's a very strong belief within the Jewish world, within the Christian world, and within the 5% which I belong to of the Jewish world. But obviously in Islam, I think Islam sees Yeshua, Jesus, as only a prophet.
As a prophet, yes.
Yes, not as the Messiah, so to speak.
Not as a son of God, no.
Right. So a different belief there. So, let's say we fast forward when the Messiah comes, the Jew and the Christian will say, "Yep, that's the same guy."
Right.
But I don't understand how Islam will see that that's the same guy. So, at the moment, obviously, there's a disagreement between Jewish world and Christian world as to who that guy is. Christians will say he was that guy, Jesus was that guy, and the Jewish world will predominantly say no, he wasn't that guy. And we have a big 2,000-year disagreement since then.
People equate Judaism with Zionism. So many people think that Zionism and Judaism are the same thing. What are your thoughts on this perception? And what's the difference between Judaism and Zionism?
This is super controversial, okay? Now, Zionism is actually mentioned in the Bible, okay? And Jerusalem, another name for Jerusalem is Zion, okay? So to be one that wants to be part of the world to come in Jerusalem is to be biblically a Zionist. However, modern culture flips that. And the one that wants to, let's say, restore the nation of Israel back in the 17 and 1800s, that person becomes a Zionist because he wants to restore Israel from a political purpose, not a biblical purpose. So they become known as Zionists. So therefore that tag carries into the 20th century and now the 21st century, that you've got a difference in the opinion of Zionism. The biblical one is long lost and not many people look at it. And the political one is the one that raises its head and has a bad stigma to it. And this political one is driven by mostly, originally back in the 1800s, non-religious Jews that simply wanted to re-establish the state of Israel. Specifically, we're talking around 1867, 1860s. Anyone today who's seen as wanting to, let's say, expand the nation of Israel, create the nation of Israel, uphold the nation of Israel is a Zionist. Okay, so it then gets this negative stigma. When biblically, all they're doing is trying to be part of the restoration of Israel and be a biblical Zionist, because in Jerusalem, which will be the royal home of the ruling Messiah, will be also known as Zion. I actually personally get confused because there's so many definitions of Zionism out there. you don't know what the context is behind the person that uses that phrase. So I, like many Jews, stand back and go, well, what am I?
Yeah.
It's because I believe in the coming Messiah, because I believe in the coming of the Messianic age. Does that make me a Zionist? And is biblically I can see I am a Zionist, but is that a good thing or a bad thing? Out there in the world, we're taught it's negative. So religious Jews now will try and disassociate from that. Okay? And just this is why so many religious Jews, let's say, backing out, and they're less seen amongst the culture, because the finger pointing becomes difficult to deal with. I'm dressed in my Shabbat clothes as I am now, and I go walking down the streets of Sydney, I will get a lot of finger pointing. Some of that will include the word Zionist, and it leaves me confused. What is a Zionist, according to your definition?
Here at the last question, David, which is, what is the purpose of life according to Judaism? And how does this belief shape the daily lives of Jewish people? And in other words, what are some of the main characteristics of a practicing Jew?
2,000-year-old story. A person comes into one of the great sages. He asks him the same question. Teach me Judaism in 1 minute, standing on one foot. And he says, that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And then the next question pops up. Who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is anybody that is happy to live with you. It doesn't matter if he's Hindu, Muslim, Christian, atheist, whatever. It says in the opening chapters of the Bible, let's create man in our image. And it uses the word zal, betzalel, in the image of God. And zal is loosely translated as shadow. The shadow means that you are the shadow of God. I am the shadow of God, meaning that we're exactly the same. Torah even says to love your enemies.
Torah is actually the Old Testament of Bible, right?
Okay, more controversy. Okay, so Old Testament is a phrase that Christian church fathers gave to what we call Tanakh. So this was a phrase from the year 160 by a church father called Marcion. And this is as Christianity is separating from the original Jewish way to Messiah. Christians called Old Testament, we call Tanakh, which is basically 3 books in one, which is Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, which is the law, prophets, and the writings.
Right.
So Tanakh is what we look at. And then if you're Messianic or if you're Christian, Brit Chadashah or Renewed Testament is what you look at for a commentary on the Messiah. So in Tanakh, it's told, love your neighbor, love your God. The two most important commandments is in the Shema, as was said earlier in Deuteronomy 6:4. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And then the second greatest commandment is what I said, love your neighbor as yourself. So you have one, which is a vertical relationship. Love your God with all your heart and soul and mind. And the other, which is a horizontal relationship. Love your neighbor as yourself. I went to a birthday party with a Christian friend, and he was Egyptian. But we went to an Islamic restaurant in just Sanssouci, down near the airport. And we walk in there, and I'm the only Jew. And this is all Lebanese Muslim. And we walk in there, and he's got his Christian friends, and suddenly 40, 50 people are sort of like, this is weird. Why is there a religious Jew walking into this restaurant? And I'm like, well, I feel weird because, suddenly I've got 40 to 50 eyes on me, and I don't know if somebody's going to yell out Allah Akbar or not, And so there's a little bit of tension in the air, but then being a birthday, all the Christian friends started singing happy birthday to our friend. And then I decided to teach them happy birthday in Hebrew.
Right.
When they started to learn that, we started to go through it 3 times in the Hebrew. Guess what happened? All the restaurants started to join in happy birthday in Hebrew because it's a simple tune. It's like that's breaking down barriers, opening doors. And so the people in that restaurant probably went home that night and said, this crazy Jew walked into the restaurant. We ended up singing with him.
You say happy birthday in Hebrew.
We use the same tune.
Right, okay.
Yom Haledut Sameach, Yom Haledut Sameach. So it doesn't matter what language, like even in our synagogue, when we have people that come from different walks of life,
Yeah.
we will sing happy birthday to them in their original language. So we're singing in Hebrew, English, Chinese, Tamil,
Tamil. Oh,
um, uh, Malalawang.
Malayalam.
That's the one. It's a hard word to pronounce. Chinese, I said that. Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, Russian. And guess what? It's all the same tune. It seems to be this really amazing universal tune. Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for your time again, and it was lovely chatting with you overall. And the questions that you answered, I hope a lot of the wrong perceptions about Judaism and Jews, especially from our part of the world, people would get rid of those perceptions with this discussion. Thank you.
Maybe his will. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.